Australian waters are providing ideal hunting grounds for two target shark species, and La Niña could play into the number of bites on swimmers increasing, a marine biologist has claimed. Great white sharks have been responsible for 334 incidents since the 1900s, according to a database collated by the Taronga Conservation Society Australia, while tiger sharks and bull sharks trailed behind with 206 and 148 incidents respectively. Taronga Conservation Society classifies a shark incident by 3 factors. These include, whether the person is alive at the time of the incident, the person is in the water or using a small watercraft, and there's a determined attempt by a shark to bite a person, equipment worn or being used, or the small watercraft. The interaction is recorded in the database regardless of whether the bite is successful. Great whites, tigers and bull sharks are in the top 3 target species involved in the most serious bites around the nation. However, data shows from roughly 2009 the number of run-ins with great whites jumped substantially. And an increasing trend has been mirrored for bull sharks from 2020. Read more. Liz Truss quits as UK PM after less than 7 weeks in the job. Dr. Leonardo Guida, a shark scientist and conservationist at the Australian Marine Conservation Society, said run-ins with these sharks are likely to become more common. There has also been a population increase over the past 20 years on the Australian coastline. In NSW, for example, between 2007 to 2017, roughly in that period where there is quite a bit of an increase, the state's population grew by about 1 million people, Guida said. Outside of Sydney, most of that growth occurred in areas like Newcastle, the Illawarra and Central Coast, so these coastal areas. In short, generally around Australia, with a population increase, you're likely to see an increase in shark bites. Guida said changes in water temperatures are also likely to play a part. Read more. What we know about shark attack occurrences around Australia. Climate change could also be influencing the risk of shark bites, he said. With climate change we can see movement patterns in sharks change. So bull sharks, for example, are projected to head further south down the NSW coast as the East Australian Current (EAC) drives warmer water further south. They are projected to hang around even a bit longer. These movements might overlap for more periods over time with beaches that are popular with people. Guida said changes to the EAC is also influencing great white shark movements, as the current creates cold water eddies. These are kind of like the off-spurts, he explained. We know from tracking studies that white sharks love cold water eddies because they tend to be more productive in foods. So it's also a possibility that as the current brings warmer waters further down the coast, these cold water offshoots, or eddies, could be pushed closer to shore. Do these cold water eddies overlap with areas that are popular with people? We don't quite know. But ultimately an increase in bites potentially in the future can relate to population change, compounded by warming waters, and changing movement patterns. Read more. Severe storms threaten multiple states. Why East Coast waters are the perfect hunting grounds. Guida said the waters off Australia's east coast are providing ideal hunting grounds for both great white sharks and bull sharks. To understand why these waters are ideal, one must first know how the animals prefer to hunt. Read more. Curious great whitetails kayaker off murky South Australian beach. Bull sharks tend to favor murky and turbid waters, Guida said, adding stormy weather and La Niña is providing this in droves. We know from scientific research, particularly at river mouths, they like to hang around there during and shortly after storms. What we're seeing over the last couple of years with La Niña patterns is public warnings from bodies like NSW government, saying there's a lot of rivers near popular surf spots, so heads up, perhaps avoid the water. Guida said the waters off the Hunter Coast, around Newcastle and Port Stephens, is a known great white shark nursery with another at the furthest edge of the Victorian Inlet. Read more. Powerball jackpot booms to biggest prize in Aussie history. We actually think juvenile white sharks migrate up and down the coast, he said. They favor these coastal waters as there's relatively high food abundance, with fish populations like Australian salmon and stingrays. But also it's relatively sheltered compared to the open ocean where the big adults tend to be. Being juveniles on the east coast, there's obviously a high overlap with area that are also popular with humans, whether it be bathing, swimming, surfing. Great white sharks have been responsible for all fatal NSW attacks for the past 2 years, with the state clocking the highest number of attacks in the nation over this period. The reason for the severity of great white attacks is the animals have an ambush hunting method. They come up unannounced, Gita said. And what we roughly know is they favor low light conditions, as it helps this ability to be hidden from potential prey. Another really interesting thing they've found with white sharks is they actually hunt in orientation to the sun. The glare actually hides them, in a similar way to how fighter pilots hide themselves. Despite spike attacks, fatalities remain stable. Gita said it's important not to be alarmed by the data set, explaining that while shark incidents are increasing, fatalities are not. That trend has remained relatively stable at about 1.5 people per year, he said. What that says is despite more people going into the water and interactions increasing, there also seems to be better emergency responses. This speaks to why it's so important to have non-lethal mitigation strategies, for instance more lifeguards, better medical training, more watching towers, more drones, so if there's an incident there's more chance of someone getting life-saving treatment. Gita outlined the steps someone should take should they find themselves an unwilling witness to an attack. If you're out surfing with your mate at a remote beach and you have a surf rope, you should use that as a makeshift tourniquet, he said, adding most bites typically occur on the legs or lower portion of the body. That speaks to the ambush nature of a shark. If you don't have a rope and you can rest them on a surfboard, or you can get them close to the beach, put your fist between their hip and their bits and push down to stem the blood flow.